Welcome to Jobshare podcast, the place for sharing everything we know about careers for the next generation. If you are an employer looking to grow your business through new talent, or a young person looking for honest advice on getting and succeeding in a job, then we're here for you. So let's get to it. I'm Charlie Black, and I'm joined here today by my most fabulous co-hosts, Katia Douglas and Natalie Parry. So today in the Jobshare podcast, we're discussing video interviewing, something that is very near and dear to our hearts. We have been working with video interviewing for some time now, trying to connect young people with potential employers out there. So we're going to talk through some of the benefits, the top tips and hints for both employers and young people out there who are using video interviewing. But let's kick off first and talk about why we think video interviewing is so important at the moment, Natalie.
Yeah, I think with video interviewing, with everyone being remote now, it just gives an opportunity for that process still to continue and still to have that face value, I suppose, that an interview gives to you. I think you can tell a lot by a person with how they react to things. You can react to them as well during an interview. So I think it just seems a bit more personal. A lot of the time, we spoke about this in our last podcast, we spoke about the fact that people often pick people very similar in their teams, or people that they can see fitting into their teams, not necessarily similar, but fitting into their teams. And I think you can get a much more of a feel for that on a video than you can when it's just on a phone.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think because of the pandemic, we've all had to adapt our practices, but this has been a real kind of turning point in terms of how employers should be, or what they should be thinking about in terms of how they are recruiting people, and in particular young people. We work with lots and lots of young people, and we have done for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
And I think we were quite early adopters of the notion that CVs are not a good measure of young people, and they're not a really good way for young people to get across who they are and the benefits that they can bring to an organisation, and that really important personality and who they are as an all-round human being, four-dimensional person.
Absolutely.
So how do we think, video interviewing, do we think that gives more of an opportunity for people to show themselves during that recruitment process? Katia?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's because obviously at the moment you can't meet people face to face, and I think when you're over the phone it's all right, but you don't get the full feel for that person, and you don't get to know them and see how they interact with you as well. Because I think as a manager, when you have an interview with somebody face to face, it's about how you're getting on with that person, and whether or not you can see them working under you, and if you can see them as a part of your team. And I think it's quite hard to get all of that over the phone, whereas with the video, it's not quite as personal as being in person, but I think you get a lot more than if you were just speaking to them over the phone, and you get a feel for that person if you could see them working under you, and also their personality and who they are. I don't think you can get all of that across on a phone call or even in an email.
I think it can actually be more relaxing, can't it, for the environment? Because I think when you're on a phone, you don't know how somebody's reacting to what you've said. You don't get a feel for whether that was the right way to go with that answer. So I think for the candidate, it does definitely make them feel more relaxed. But I also think from an employer as well, they can see that the person is engaged, that they are interested in doing this interview. They're not kind of doing something else while speaking to you. And from an employer, to be fair, because we've all been on phone calls when we've still been sending an email at the same time. Everybody's done that. So I think there is the distraction side of it, which wherein you're in your video, you can see that person engaged with you. You can see that person.
Yeah, and if you're over the phone and you're asking them questions and maybe there's something they didn't understand, you wouldn't maybe pick that up on a call. No. Whereas if you're face to face, you could probably see by their expressions, maybe something you said didn't quite hit the nail and you need to elaborate on that a little bit more. And I think when you're doing it by video, you just have the opportunity to sort of capture all of those things, rather than on a call where you might not be able to pick up on they haven't understood what you've said, or they're just not clear on what you're talking about with regards to the role. So you get more out of them.
Definitely.
So we have been working with video interviewing for how many months now, Nat?
Since October, so 3 months, 4 months.
4 months, probably like 6 by the time this podcast
Yeah.
so we'll have it well and truly under our belt. And one of the things that we've noticed is the rate of engagement with video interviewing. So when you're an employer, it's so hard when you put a vacancy out there and nobody responds. I mean, that's just the worst feeling. Or the applications that you do get through, you can see are just not great quality.
Yeah.
So I was noticing some of the data that you put together, Natalie, around video interviewing and the engagement of that.
Yeah.
Are you finding that more applicants are engaging with adverts because there's a video interview process involved?
Definitely. I think, especially as we work with young people, they're kind of so used to being on video. I think if you know young people or have been around them, they're always kind of on their phones. And I think even when they're chatting to their friends or playing on like even the PlayStations or Xboxes, quite often they're FaceTiming their friends at the same time. So I think they're quite comfortable with that software. They're quite comfortable with the video side of things. I mean, just on, you know, recent data that I've looked at for our company, it was almost double the engagement that we had through just doing it through a phone to them doing the videos. Now, I think there's a couple of reasons for that. I think the fact that they feel more relaxed is definitely a reason. But obviously with it being a video, we have a solo interview part to our video. So basically we can set up an interview which they can conduct themselves. It asks them questions and then they are recorded responding to the questions.
Mm-hmm.
They can do that anytime, day or night. So our recruiters aren't having to work, you know, really late into the evening to speak to people. They could literally send that solo interview out and that person can do that in their own time when they feel comfortable and be able to make a decent response. Whereas obviously if we're contacting people, generally sort of 8 till 6 is the normal time that we will speak to candidates. If we're contacting people during that time, they're often doing something else. So, you know, they might have been at college or in school or whatever it might be, out with their friends. You know, there can be lots of different things that they're busy doing, which they could then do the solo interviews on an evening. So we're finding especially that side's working really, really well for us.
Mm-hmm. So we've got 2 different ways of utilising video interviewing. There's solo interview and what we call a live room interview. So Nat, can you just explain what the difference between a solo interview and a live room interview is?
Yeah. So a solo interview, like I say, is a set of questions that we can set up, completely free format, as many questions or as little questions as we want. And what will happen is when the person starts the interview, it'll explain the process to them, get them to sort of test their software and things, and then we'll follow with a question, give them sort of a 5-second countdown, and then that person records themselves answering the question.
Mm-hmm.
So that's very much solo, done on their own, able to do any sort of time. Whereas the other software we have, which is our live rooms, are actually a room where you can send a link to a person, so to a learner or, you know, potential candidate, and we can book a time for them to appear in the room, and they would just click on the link and it becomes like an online video interview that we can do. All of those are recorded, and we obviously can share those recordings with employers as well.
Mm-hmm.
So what we can do is go through kind of all the preparation stuff with them for interview on like a live face-to-face basis. And then what we can do afterwards is make a short video, a short recording to send to an employer with questions that they may have asked us to ask them. So it's working really good. I think we're finding, because we have that, just what I was saying before, really, face-to-face engagement with a learner, we're getting so much more out of them. So they feel much more comfortable talking to us about things. They feel much more sort of relaxed to sort of really get into the nitty-gritty of what they want to do. And the relationships are better. We're finding that we're not, because I mean, everybody who works in recruitment will understand that candidates disappear off the face of the earth. Just no idea where they go, some of them. That's happening less and less. And I think that's because they have a face to a name. So they know that, you know, so-and-so has done that interview with me. They've got that relationship with them. They're more likely to stay connected, stay in touch than somebody that's maybe just called them once who they've got no sort of personal association to, I suppose.
So you feel that it really helps that relationship. So maybe even whether it's a recruiter recruiting on behalf of an organization or somebody from the organization recruiting for themselves, it builds that relationship during that recruitment process earlier on. by doing it by video. That's really cool.
And we've had some really good feedback. So from both employers and learners talking about how much they love the process, how they found it really unique, very innovative, very sort of different to everybody else, that made us sort of stand out in the crowd. So I think, yeah, it's making a big difference.
Good. And Kat, you've been the employer, so you're currently going through that process at the moment of using video interview to recruit. Yeah. What's the best bits? And actually, let's be honest, what's the worst bits about video interviewing for you?
I think the best bits are you definitely get a feel for that person. I think a true feel for that person, because they're on their own. They've obviously set themselves up ready to sit and answer the questions, because it's very clear, obviously, that it's going to be a video interview. I think the bad sides of it, I have had some very strange ones where
yep, we've had them too.
I was a bit too scared to watch the video, if I'm completely honest, because I didn't know what was going to come out from the corner. And I think that might just be because they weren't paying attention. I don't know. But I mean, I had one where it was literally just the corner of somebody's bedroom and music playing in the background. But then at the same time, I've had some really good ones as well, where I feel like if I hadn't have done it this way, I might not have got that sort of thing out of them on the phone. No. And I just feel like you get a better feel for somebody in terms of like who they are, how they're going to fit into your team, their personality as well. And I think the questions as well, if you can make them very specific to what you want, to make sure that that person has the skills and capabilities that you want, it can really help your screening process as well. And I think people would be more inclined to click a link to do a video interview if they have the confidence to do that. And if they don't click it, you're probably screening out a lot of people that you would have spoken to on the phone and maybe would have wasted a lot of your time. So I think it definitely saves time. There's still risks. People are not as up to date with technology in some instances as maybe the younger generation. So there will be their flaws. But I think as long as people are fully up to spec in terms of what the expectations are, what's going to happen when they go on, and the sorts of questions they're going to have to answer, and you fully prepare them, then I think it is a really good process. Especially if you've got like remote jobs where you're based in one place and somebody's based down the country, you're not having to pay for travel expenses, everything's straight away. You don't have to book time in the diary. It's a lot more instant than, oh, we'll have to book that in for 2 weeks because I've got to get a train and I've got to do this and I've got to do that. So I think in terms of saving time, especially if you're recruiting remotely, it's a great way of doing it, because you're not restricted to locations and people being able to get there to actually attend the interview. So I think it's a great way of doing it. I think even after the pandemic, I think it's a really productive way of recruiting.
Oh, definitely.
Oh, yeah. Without a doubt. I mean, I've recruited somebody recently via video interview, and you have both been part of that process.
Yeah.
Now, this person I've never met in real life, but I've had several video calls with them. You were there in the video interview.
Yeah.
And actually, I feel like I got to know that person really, really quickly.
Yeah.
On a real kind of human, personal level, because they were in their own home, I'm in my own home. We get to have kind of a real different type of conversation.
I was just going to say, with you saying they're in their own home, I sometimes feel like when you invite somebody in for a face-to-face interview at your office, you don't always get a true reflection of what that person's actually like. It's a bit of a like, I'm going for an interview, I need to be like this, I've got to say that. Whereas when they're at home, I think they're more their true self. So I think you actually get a better insight into that person and who they are, as opposed to when they come for an interview and they've got their interview face on. So yeah, 100%. I think you get a more natural feel for who they are. So I think it's actually, even though it's on video and it's less personal, it actually is more personal.
Yeah, definitely.
Strangely.
I think it comes about the stresses of an interview as well, doesn't it? I mean, everyone's been in that situation where you've gone for the bus hasn't turned up, you're then having to ring someone to get you a lift to go somewhere. Like, we've all had those people that have come to interview that have come in almost like can't breathe when they walk through the door because they've had this horrendous time to get here.
I will never forget one person that I did employ him in the end, but he turned up and he was a sweaty mess. I mean, literally, his forehead was dripping.
Yeah.
Oh, bless him.
I mean, it was just as well he came to interview with me, because I thought that was funny. And we made a joke about it, and he asked me if he could have some tissues to wipe his head, and it was a bit of an icebreaker. But generally speaking, that's a really awful thing to happen to somebody and gets them off on totally the wrong foot. If you don't have, you to get the best out of an interview, you, the interviewer, need to be relaxed and plan. You've planned for what questions you're going to ask.
Yeah.
And you want that candidate to be as relaxed and give the best version of themselves that they possibly can. And I think video, weirdly enough, because lots of people feel that it's impersonal, but I beg to differ. I'm sorry.
I do. Yeah. 100%. I would far rather now video call somebody than pick up the phone.
Oh, I actually have developed a bit of phone fear.
It doesn't feel right if I'm like, I can't see you.
Yeah, 100%.
I don't like it.
I have developed a little bit of phone fear, and when my phone rings, I'm genuinely like, what's that? Who's that? What's, it's like some national emergency has occurred. Where if somebody says to me, can we just jump on a Zoom call? Or I'll say to someone, just call me on Teams.
Yeah.
It's so much better. I just think
it's much better.
So much better. So I suppose my top tip is don't bother with telephone interviews. They are rubbish and you really don't get a feel for a person.
No.
So replace if you're doing telephone interviews, 100%, please replace those with some type of video interviewing, whether that is a solo interview, where the computer does the work and you don't have to be there and you review it later, or whether you go straight into a live room situation where you actually are on a call with somebody, a video call with somebody and interviewing. So please let this be like the death. Let this be a movement of no more telephone interviews. They are horrible.
Yeah.
But I think, really think about replacing face-to-face interviews with video interviews. How many people, well, maybe that's a bit, I shouldn't put you on the spot with that, Nat, but tell me, how many people have you now recruited via video interview? No, what I'm trying to say is, do you feel that it has hindered or helped the interviewing process of getting young people employed?
Oh, it's definitely improved the process, and it's definitely made it we've had less people that's no shows. We've had less people that are turning up unprepared, because you've got their full attention. So when we're doing all the interview prep with them, they're in front of us on a screen. We can make sure that they, are taking in and understanding, because that's another thing with young people. Sometimes they don't like to say they don't understand something. They feel a bit daft sometimes asking those questions. So I think we can notice that they don't, because we can see their face.
Yeah.
So it's absolutely improved the process. The figures are, the data is that we have recruited more people and had a much better turnaround on the video interviewing stuff than we have when we did it over the phone previously. But I think the no-show thing's just a massive thing.
I wanted to pick up on that point, actually. No-shows are every recruiter's worst nightmare. It's just so painful. And for the employer as well, that's a really frustrating moment, because the amount of time and energy that goes into your recruitment process, and then they don't show up. So that being able to reduce that no-show, and quite often with young people, it's not because they don't want the job, it's because they can't afford the public transport fees to get to the interview, because they don't feel like they've got the right clothes for the interview. And actually we are creating far more opportunity for all, allowing for a much more kind of diverse mix of candidate, and better, bringing in different thoughts and different people into the workplace by utilizing the technology and the video interviewing process.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
So more video interviews, people. We loved it so much.
No, it's just going back to what you were saying before about how you don't get sometimes the best impression from people over the phone. And obviously I've had an experience myself with a more mature candidate who I'd done a telephone interview with, and initially I was like, oh God, there's no way he can work here, he wouldn't fit in, I think he's too posh. And then when he actually came in, obviously that wasn't the case, and he's been here for what, a year and a half now, and he's absolutely lovely.
Oh, he's
and
fab.
He is, and he's changed my whole perception on recruitment as well, I think. And I think that just shows you, when you speak to somebody over the phone, those initial impressions are not the right impressions, and you do need to, not necessarily face to face, like I say, on video I would have got the same had he came in, and I just think my initial impression of him was like, oh God, no. But then when he came in, and he's been here a year and a half, and he's amazing.
He's wonderful.
So
he is genuinely fabulous. Joy. And that's a really important point, Kat. The visual cues you get from somebody in communication, so your body language and how you, like me right now, those of you that are listening cannot see this, but anyone that's watching can see I talk with my hands.
I'm the same.
I'm one of those people, and I whack stuff out the way. No, but that's not the point. The point is that people give away a lot of information with their body language and how they want to present the information. You can see you're laughing at my hands waving around.
No, I'm not. I'm just, that it just makes me think about something else. But
okay, all right.
I think that's really important, that I would also put on the top tips, though, that everybody can see what you're doing and see your visual cues and see.
Yes, well, maybe we will. I know exactly what you're talking about now, but we'll get to that when we're talking about the candidate. But actually, that goes for the employer as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes.
You have to remember that they can see your face.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I actually did have I didn't interview. It was a video call. It wasn't a video interview, but it could have been an interview for somebody who didn't realise that we had cameras on and picked his nose for the whole hour and a half. And
no,
guys, come on now. We be very aware that people can see you.
Yeah.
And that is why people stick post-it notes over the top of their cameras. Here's a tough question that I'm going to throw out there. At the moment, we're very pro video interview because we can't do face-to-face. What about when we can?
I would still use it as an initial screening.
Yes, that's exactly what I was going to say. Initial screening, definitely, but I would still like to see someone face-to-face.
Yeah, I think it's always nice to meet somebody face-to-face, but I think as part of your initial screening process, if they're not willing to sit in front of a camera and answer the questions that you've asked, especially for the sorts of jobs I would be recruiting for, then I probably wouldn't. You're sort of getting those people out before you're wasting your time interviewing 12 people when only 2 out of the 12 are all right. So I would definitely still use it as a screening, as part of the screening process. But then also, if I was recruiting remotely, I don't want to have to go to London to interview somebody. I would do it by video interview.
So we're spaced apart. I'm in Suffolk, you guys are in Newcastle, but we're one team. But if you're recruiting somebody in Newcastle and you want me to be part of that video,
it's a lot of travel.
That's a lot of travel. It's a lot of time. And if you want to interview somebody tomorrow and I'm not available to come to Newcastle until next week, or maybe several months away if we don't COVID out, but
2022 looks good
in the grand scheme of things. Back in the day when COVID was not even a thing, you would ask me to come for an interview, to interview a candidate with you, and that might be a week, 2 weeks before I can make an appearance. Whereas video interviewing can be there in seconds.
Especially if you've got a vacancy you need to fill straight away, and you can't afford that time lag, then it's going to help you do things a lot quicker and get things moving faster.
And you lose candidates in between that process. We've had it ourselves where really good people we've known are really good, and just they go overnight, they go really quickly. So, and that's the same any age, young people and adults. So
actually, that's a really good point. I was on a webinar. I don't even know what day of the week it is. I was on a webinar recently.
Sometime.
And it was all around recruiting Gen Z and practices that are really important. And there was some young people on that call talking about, the good experience that they've had in recruitment. One of the points that was made, which I haven't really heard people make before, was that time lapse between offering somebody a job and them starting is so vitally important. And if that long lag that can be between offering someone a job and starting is a big risk to lose that candidate. Maybe you lose them to another job. Maybe they have second thoughts and they become anxious about the situation. And what we were discussing on this webinar was the use of video calls to touch base with, I really hate that phrase, but I couldn't think of anything else. But the using video calls or video instructions for other people that they'll be working with during that time lapse between them being offered and them starting is, so video interviewing is a way of building relationships and really embedding that person into your organization, your culture before they've even started. It's not a big ask. You're not asking them to come in for a day. You're just asking them to have, a few minutes. Only has to be 10-15 minutes of just a check-in via video call. I think that point about video being a really good way of building relationships with people that you don't know.
Absolutely.
So I think that's something employers really need to think about, which was a little bit off topic, but
it's still relevant though. It is still relevant. It's keeping connected, especially under the current circumstances, isn't it? So
So on the webinar, interesting statistic that I found out, Generation Z are 3 times more likely to describe themselves as introverts than any other generation. So how do we think video interviewing might help an employer get the very best out of an introverted candidate?
I think although they're introverted, I think it's more that it's about that they don't sort of openly share things in sort of conversation. I think actually doing this in a video where on their phones or however they'll do it, but on a screen, you might actually get more from that person because they may be more relaxed or feel sort of less conscious than they would maybe in a face-to-face setting.
Yeah, so Gen Z, they're a digitally native generation, very connected to the digital world, and they're immersed from birth, born with an iPad in their hands. They really understand how technology works and how that is very much integrated into their life.
I just wanted to add to what we were saying before about them looking at phones all of the time. And I think a lot of the feedback that you get from employers, especially when they're interviewing younger people, is the eye contact thing.
Yes.
I know when I was younger, I was always taught you got to have a firm handshake, look people in the eye.
Handshaking, remember that?
I know, that was the thing.
Okay, boomer.
But you know what I mean? That's what my dad always taught us. Firm handshake, make sure you look them in the eye. But obviously with young people, because everything's by video and stuff, when you have them in an interview setting where it's face to face, especially if you're a bit older and they're not looking in the eye, you're going to sort of think they're being a bit ignorant. But that's not because of that. It's just because they're not used to doing that. So I think when you're doing a video interview, you can't tell if they're looking you in the eye or not. So you're not judging them on that.
Yes. Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
Those little things that people do judge people on, but actually don't really matter in the grander scheme of things. It's just in that instance. So I think sometimes with a video interview, you're not looking out for those little things that maybe you would in a face-to-face, and you're actually looking at them more openly.
Yeah, more of an open mind, giving people an opportunity to be successful. Because you do, whether you are honest about it or not, everybody has unconscious bias. And if it's something, I will hold my hands up and say, I'm one of those people I was one of those people when we used to shake hands, that a limp handshake used to really upset me.
Yeah. I'm the same.
And I'm not gonna lie. I could not get over it for the next 5 minutes of the interview, and I would really have to kind of mentally push past that. Whereas now you don't have to contend with things like that.
No.
And I think for
Tap my elbow.
Yes.
That was a weak
wasn't very
tap.
hard.
Yes. But I did that to someone the other day and they were not very happy. They were like, don't ever do that to me again.
Don't touch me.
In this section, we're going to run through some top tips for employers who are recruiting via video interview.
Mm-hmm.
So our first top tip is to prepare your candidates for the format and who will be in the video interview. It's really important to get the very best that you can out of your candidates. Otherwise, it's a waste of time for you and a waste of time for them, and ultimately just a really disappointing experience. So top tip is to make sure that your candidates know that the format that video interview is going to take. They know whether you're going to be asking competency-based questions, for example, and know who's in there. It's really awkward to rock up to any interview, but especially a video interview, because you're kind of waiting for somebody to introduce you. If with people you don't know, so it is worth taking the minute to make sure that they know who is in there with you.
And how many, because like I said, that could be quite frightening if they go in and there's 4 people and they're only expecting one
person.
So,
absolutely.
Yeah. I think the next one, sort of rolling on from that, is with employers, we would always say to get there early, so that the candidate isn't there before you. So making sure that you're in sort of 10-15 minutes even before the interview starts, so you can make sure everybody that's supposed to be there is there, that you're prepared, you know who's going to ask what, who's going to start the interview, is there somebody going to ask the questions. Just have that time prepared early so that you can make sure that you don't have to do it in front of the candidate, I suppose, or have the candidates awkwardly waiting for people to pop into the screen.
That's a sort of opposite to what you would normally recommend, because normally you'd say to the candidate, you get there 15 minutes early and show them that you're keen. But obviously in a video incident, it's the other way around, isn't it? Making sure that all of the people who are going to be interviewing are there ready, and also making sure that the links work. So you've sent them the right link to the right interview, because the worst thing that could happen is you've sent them a link to an interview that isn't the interview that are actually interested in attending. So and equally on the candidate side as well, make sure that those links work and it's taking you through to the right place so that you are there at the right time. And if it doesn't work, let them know beforehand so they can send you the right link so you can actually get through and attend the interview.
So as an employer, you need to work a little bit harder during a video interview than you do face-to-face. And what we mean by that is you have to fill that space. They can't, when you're in a room with somebody, you get a real kind of feel for who they are. It's a human connection thing. When you're on video, you have to just be that little bit more expressive. You have to talk that little bit slower, be that little bit more clear. Think of it as being on stage, a bit more lighting, a bit more expression, and it'll be a much better experience for everybody involved.
Yeah, because you don't have the opportunity to show them around the office and things and give them a feel for the company like you normally would in a face-to-face instance. So I think in that instant, you do need to be able to get all of that across and really show them who you are and want them to work for you as well as you want them to work for you. So
exactly.
I think sort of following on from that, it's making sure that they can see you. Don't choose a room where the lighting's really bad. Make sure that you haven't got lots of things in the background, that you're positioned really well, that like me, you can see it's a clean wall. You don't want to have lots of pictures or distractions, because it'll just distract them from actually listening to what you've got to say. They're just going to be looking at what's in the background. And also making sure that your sound is good as well. So maybe headphones rather than just straight into the laptop, especially if you're at home and there's other people in the house, just so that you can have that quiet space away and they can just hear you. They're not hearing everything else going on, like your washing machine or your dishwasher or your TV. Make sure it's quiet. Or your boiler.
I think the other thing for me is make sure the interview is planned out. So you know who's talking, you know what's going to happen in each section. I think with planning for the interview as well, if there's something that you would like for the candidate to prepare, make sure that that's gone out with plenty of time. So if you wanted them to prepare, a presentation of something, or if you wanted them to do, a quick assessment, making sure that all that information is planned out beforehand, so you know that it all runs very smoothly as it would in an office environment.
just to elaborate on that point a bit more, if you are going to ask them to deliver a presentation, for example, and you were expecting them to be in a screen share situation, or the other way around, if you were planning as an employer to do some kind of presentation, email a PDF version of that presentation before the interview, because it's nothing worse than when technology fails you. And if all else, if you can't get the screen share to work, then at least you've got not a hard copy, but an emailed copy, a PDF version of those slides to talk through. So the next tip is room locking. So there's nothing more embarrassing, even in a face-to-face interview, it's nothing more cringy than when you walk past the next candidate going in for interview, or you walk into the room and that candidate's CV, the one before you or the one next, is sitting on the desk. It makes it really uncomfortable and it's really distracting. So employers, make sure that nobody else can get into that interview room when you're doing a video interview. So some video interviewing software have the ability to lock the room, so that once everybody's in, you lock it and nobody else can get in until you unlock it. Otherwise, if you're using something like Zoom, don't use the same link. Set up a new video interview for the next candidate. Save everybody the embarrassment, really. Much better for everyone.
We've all been on a video call where somebody's just popped in randomly, looked really shocked and then left.
Yes.
So, I think the other one, which I think is really, really important, is if you're going to do a video interview, have your cameras on. And that's everybody have your cameras on. I think it's just really awkward when they don't realise somebody's there because they don't have their camera on. And especially if there's a number of people in the interview, it can be quite easy to miss that there's not somebody there, because often it only sort of pops up with the video when somebody starts talking. Because I've been in meetings, I've been in things where I haven't even realised that this person was in until they've sort of suddenly started talking. So I think it will throw people off. It'll make it really awkward. So please, everybody that's in the interviews, have your cameras on, just so that there is that personal touch to it, but also so that everybody there is aware of what's going on. No one's going to kind of roll off topic or get a bit anxious because they didn't realise that somebody's voice is popping up.
I think it's also uncomfortable for the other person, isn't it? If you have your camera on, then they don't have their camera on, or vice versa. I think whoever has that camera on feels really uncomfortable.
Definitely,
because they don't know when to stop and start. They don't know how they're reacting to the answers that they're given or the questions. So I think it's just better all around if both people do have their cameras on, because it makes it easier to read who needs to start next, because you start speaking over each other and stuff as well, because you can't see the other person. And I think it's also really important to clarify the next steps. So once you've had that interview, is this the first stage? Is this the second stage? What's going to happen after this? Just so that they're very clear as to know where this is going to lead to and what they need to prepare for next as well.
Absolutely. It's nothing worse than walking out of an interview or virtually leaving an interview and not knowing what's next. Am I waiting for a job offer? Am I waiting for a second interview, third interview? So come on, employers, tell people what the crack is. Make sure that people know what's happening next. And our final tip for employers is learn about Gen Z, really. If you are not thinking about the next generation entering into the workplace, then you are isolating people. You are missing out on genuine talent that's out there. For the first time in history, we have the potential to have 5 generations in the workforce. And that means we have to really think about our recruitment practices, our onboarding processes, and really making sure that we're building this multi-generational community where everybody can thrive. And right now, Gen Z is the newest generation coming through into that workspace. And, if we want to harness that talent and reap the benefits of that talent, then we have to give a bit back and get to understand them and how we can get the very best out of them. So in this section, we're going to talk about video interviewing from the candidate's perspective and giving some top tips for young people how to get the very best out of that video interviewing experience.
Yeah.
So they've got the job, well, no, they've got the interview and they're super excited, a little bit nervous, but super excited. What top tips have we got for young people to really maximize that opportunity?
I think it's really important to think about it as an interview. So just because it's on video and you're in your house and you're very comfortable and feel more relaxed, you still need to think about it as an interview.
Yeah.
So, you know, make sure that you're dressed like you would in an interview. And it's fine, I think, to be a bit more casual than probably how you would have dressed a couple of years ago in an interview. I think some employers, you know, don't expect to see a three-piece when they come to interview.
No.
But it's, you know, put a shirt on or, you know, make sure you just look tidy for the interview. We've had lots of experiences where I've had an interview just recently where someone had their dressing gown on. So
Lovely.
yeah, so please make sure you dress like it's normal.
I think just to expand on that point, it is important to think about it as an interview, but also don't strip yourself of your personality.
No.
Yeah.
I'm a very kind of strong advocate for bringing your whole self to work.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's important to, you know, Gen Z, very socially aware, very socially conscious, politically conscious. You know, they've got the real understanding of who they are and what's important to them. And part of who they are and what is important to them is their personal values, and they want to work somewhere that shares those personal values.
Definitely.
And you want to make sure that this is the right place for you to work, that they understand who you are. So if you like bright colours, wear bright colours.
Yeah.
That's fine. Just, you know, make sure it's not just a bright pair of pants. Nobody's pants should be on display during it.
No.
Top tip.
No underwear, no bra straps.
And be careful with tops that are off the
yes.
shoulder, because it can look like you're naked.
Yes. And it's very distracting. Even if it's not a good look. So dress for interview, but dress smartly, but in a way that reflects your personality. Give the employer as many visual cues as you can as to who you are as an individual, but the individual that you would want them to see.
Yeah.
So going back to what I was saying before about making sure that the space that you're in is quiet, and that the background is clear. You don't have lots of things in the background that are going to distract people, like mess, especially boxes, TVs. You want to make sure that the person that's interviewing you is focusing on you. They're not looking at what you've got in your background, because people are people, and if they can see stuff in the background, they will just look. It's just a natural instinct. And so I think just making sure that it's a clean space where there's not, like, there's a clean wall in a quiet room where there's not lots of background noise. It just looks better.
Definitely. And I think while you're on that, it's worth mentioning, if you are using your phone, that you make sure that it's on like a stand or a tripod or something like that, so that it's
don't
still...
hold it yourself.
No, because it's like this.
Jumping,
you can't see what I'm doing, jumping up and down.
Literally, you could travel sickness watching it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So distracting.
Please don't do that.
So make sure that it's on a stand, it's at, you know, a decent angle, so that you know, it's not up your nose or down on top of you.
Your face.
Yes, your forehead,
or your eyes.
Hello. Yeah, but especially up your nose. This seems to be quite a common thing that we have in video interviewing when it's done via phone.
I think it's because people have their laptops too far back, you know, the screen like that.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Good.
So please don't do that. Use a tripod, use a stand.
Nobody wants to see your bogies.
No. And if you know, lean it up again. If you don't have a tripod or a stand, make one out of books or something.
There's
cans
plenty
of
of ways
beans.
you can make shift. What I was going to say, sellotape it or something.
Absolutely.
Okay.
One of the things I'm struggling with tonight, so I will take this top tip for our candidates, is, you know, internet, it is a very volatile thing, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, and sometimes you're on a 5-minute delay compared to everybody else on the call. But what you can, you know, you can't always fix these issues, but what you can do is if you've got other people in the house, or well, yeah, because you're not going to be able to do this if you're doing your interview in McDonald's or in the library or anything. But if you're at home, an environment that you have some level of control over, and you're doing your interview via video, ask everybody else to just temporarily pause whatever they're watching on Netflix, or whether they're streaming Fortnite or whatever. Just can you just stop it while you do that interview, because your internet will run so much quicker if everybody in the house is not streaming or gaming. So and if you're gaming, just stop it while you're doing a video interview. That would be really helpful for everybody.
Definitely. It can be really distracting though, can't it? We've had interviews where they're delayed and you feel like you're always cutting them off because it's at different times, and it's really uncomfortable. So get everybody off their devices.
I was just going to say that I think it's also really important for them to have notes. So if there's anything specifically that they wanted to talk about, if it could be with regards to maybe some specific experience or maybe something in the job description that really interested them that they wanted to elaborate on, I think it is important to have that already, because I think when you're trying to go in and just try and, I'm not going to think of the word now.
Trying to impress. It's you're exactly right, Kat. If you are in video interviewing, the interviewer can only see what you want them to see.
Exactly.
So if it will make you feel better to have your CV or some notes or some keywords or points,
just post-its, even just post-its on the screen with reminder of words, because that's sometimes all you need. You need one word to remind you about something really great.
You can't have that in a face-to-face interview.
No, you'd look ridiculous.
Face-to-face interview, you've got to go in and you just talk and you've got to hope for the best, but you can prepare a lot better and more in depth for a video interview, because they can't see anything that's in front of you. Make sure you hide it though. You don't want them to see like reeling through a notepad of questions.
Be discreet.
I think that works vice versa as well, though, doesn't it? Like, take notes when you're actually being interviewed. So if there's something that you think, oh, that sounds really good, or that sounds really impressive, or if you've asked a question, write down the answers so that it looks like that you're showing a real interest in the interview.
Or maybe if they've said something you don't understand, make a note of it so you can recap that later and ask them a question based on that as well. I think that shows that you paid attention to what they've said as well, and writing while you're talking also shows that you're interested, but don't do it the whole way through, because then it shows that you're just not paying any attention and you're just writing a lot of stuff down.
Don't type it.
Don't
type it. That's the worst thing you can do.
It's really distracting. You'd be surprised at how loud typing sounds.
So noisy.
We're on a video call, so pen and paper, old school it. I'm afraid that's really important. Looking when you're on a video call, it's really hard not to look at yourself. It is hard, but you need to make a conscious effort to look at the camera or look at the interviewers or interviewer and not be staring at yourself the whole time. Because you can tell and it looks a bit funny, but B, you're distracted. If you're looking at yourself, some part of your brain is thinking, does my hair look okay? Have I looked up too many times? Is my lipstick the right colour?
My eyebrows are not sisters.
Exactly that.
So you don't need that stress in your life. You wouldn't be able to look at yourself in a face-to-face interview. Let it go. You are how you are. Just gonna have to live with
Plus, you're not talking to yourself, you're talking to the other person, and I think you come across a lot better when you are speaking to that person rather than speaking to yourself.
The next thing I would always say, which is something which we had on our first ever podcast, is plug in your devices.
Yes.
And when you plug them in, switch the plug on.
Yes.
Because you can plug them in and forget to push the switch, and then you lose everything and disappear out of the podcast. So it's really important, or interview as it might be. So make sure that you plug in your devices, even if it's a laptop, a phone, even if you're on 100% charge. It's incredible how much battery video interviewing actually drains.
Yes.
So regardless of your level of charge, make sure that it's plugged in whilst you're on your interview, because there's nothing worse than just dropping out. from the interview because your device has died, and then you have to wait for it to reload, and it's such a lot of time. So yeah, make
it's
sure it's plugged in.
stressful.
Yes,
And
really
you don't
stressful.
need that.
Really,
Don't create stress in your life, and don't
Yeah.
create it in an interview situation.
No.
Definitely.
Make sure you plugged into Wi-Fi, not data.
Yes.
Yes.
Wi-Fi all the way. It's not going to glitch.
Or a data cable.
Yeah.
But just don't use 4G, 5G, whatever you're using. Don't use that. If you can avoid it. Sometimes you haven't got a choice, but if you can avoid doing that, then it is just a much more stable connection for you and creates less stress for you. So one of the top tips that I gave in the employer section, which I will repeat because it's just as important for young people who are interviewing via video interview, is project. You need to overcompensate for the fact that you're not face to face. You need to speak a little bit louder, a little bit clearer. You need to take your time, and you might need to be aware of your body language and to get your point across. And you might be like me and you talk with your hands, so that comes across fairly easily. But you do have to be aware that you are on video, and there is a little bit of performance to that.
Yeah, definitely. I think the other thing that's always a big bugbear for me is when people come to interviews and they don't know the job. So I think it's really important for young people. I know that especially right now, you might have applied for 50 jobs, but know the job that you're being interviewed for. So make sure that before you go to the interview, you read over the job description, you understand what the personal specification is on that job description, so that you can make sure your answers, you can refer back to the job description, and by saying, I noticed in job description you said this, that, and the other. Well, I've got those things because, and talking about your experiences, your things that you've done outside. But it's just really important that you know that job. There's nothing worse from an interviewer's point of view than hearing an interviewee say, I've applied for loads of things, so I'm not really sure which one this is. Can you tell me a bit more about it? Because it just makes them think, well, they're not really bothered about my job.
No.
And all interviewers are very precious about their job. So
and their organisation.
So they want you to want to work for them and work for that position. So please make sure you read over that job description, over that personal specification, and base your answers around those with real life experiences.
And you can go a couple stages better than just knowing that, like, bare basics, please know that job description, please understand the job that you're applying for. But you can do your research on the organisation. It's really quite, there's nothing more deflating when you're an employer doing an interview and you say, tell me what you know about our company, and they go, oh well, not much really. And that just doesn't show willingness or any sort of interest. So please know that. And even further, which I think Gen Z have probably got nailed, research your interviewer. Check them out on LinkedIn. Find out who, Google their name, find them out if they've been in the news, if they've won an award.
Awards, definitely mention awards. They love awards.
Flattery goes a long way.
It does.
To be totally honest, but showing it really does help if you kind of know what animal you're dealing with, and you know who that, you might have some idea of who that interviewer is. So can push that little bit further.
I think to add to that, know your CV.
Oh yes.
Know your application, because I know a lot of people adjust their CVs based on the job that they're applying for. So make sure that you have a copy of that, and that everything you're referring to matches to the application that you've actually submitted, because there's nothing worse than you saying one thing and them actually reading another. It just seems that you've lied. So just make sure that if you've applied for a customer service job and you've adapted your CV to obviously fit that, which a lot of people do, and there's nothing wrong with that at all, but just make sure you remember you've done that.
Yeah, absolutely. And just take the time to read it before the interview. And as you have more jobs and more experience, it gets harder and harder to remember when you did that job at what time and what you achieved during that time. It all becomes a bit blurred. But when your interviewer is looking at it in black and white, they'll say, well, tell me about your job in well, I want to say 2016, but Gen Z, you won't have probably been working then, to be perfectly honest. But, what I'm saying is, please know what is in your CV, and they will refer to it.
Make sure the timelines are right as well,
Yes.
because I've had instances where I've interviewed people and I've referred to jobs and said, oh, did I work there then? Well, you tell me. It's your CV.
Yeah.
So I think because you just instantly lose confidence in that person, because it's like, we don't even know what you put down on paper. So how am I going to trust anything that you're saying right now? So just make sure everything marries up, because I think that is really important, because it's all about first impressions.
Definitely.
And they count a lot, because that's what people base their decisions on, is the first 15 seconds of when they meet you. So make sure that counts.
Yeah. I think I'll just finish off by saying, just enjoy that process. And it's easy to say, I know, but whatever helps you to relax, do that before you go into an interview. Mine sounds a bit old fart, I'm afraid, but mine, like I have essential oil diffuser that chills me out. So that goes on before I go into a stressful meeting. Situation. But whatever you can do, listening to music is a great thing to do, not during the interview, but before the interview. Just do something to kind of focus you and just relax as much as you possibly can, and make sure you're ready. You don't want to be running, virtually rushing into an interview situation. You want to know that all you've got to do is press a button to connect. Your sound is working, your video's in the right place. Remember to put a top on.
Don't go in naked.
No, and just do yourself a favor, make sure you're prepared and you're chilled out, and that you can give the best possible version of yourself.
I think if you can do all of the planning and prep, you'll go and feeling really relaxed. As long as you put all of those things in place beforehand, you'll be the best version of yourself. It's just making sure you put all of that planning in place so that you can.
I think as well, just to add to that, and it's the final point, I suppose, for young people especially, don't take the knockbacks as negatives. I think that's really important. There's a lot of people applying for a lot of positions out there right now. If you get the first job, that's amazing, well done, that's incredible, but the likelihood is you won't. There'll be a couple of interviews and a couple of knockbacks and just missing out. And trust me, I deal with young people every day, and people miss out on the tiniest of little things from jobs. So please just don't give up, I suppose. Is my last thing.
Keep pushing on, and every knockback is a learning experience. You can take something away from that.
I was going to say that. And
interviews are just practice. If you can practice offline with a family member or a friend, or even practice online, there's plenty of family separated at the moment who can't see each other. If you can video call a family member and get them to interview you, or a friend, then you will get more comfortable with that, because you'll feel practice at it. But lovely point, spot on that. Well, I think we did all right.
Well, I think that was all right, wasn't it?
Thank you for joining us today on Jobshare. As always, we'd love to hear your thoughts or suggestions for future podcasts. You can get in touch by emailing us at jobsharepodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on LinkedIn, YouTube, wherever you find your podcast, and of course, Insta.
How long ago did I ask that question? That's so yesterday.
You waited so long that you asked her another question. That's how long you waited.
I was like, did you change?
No.